The 1970s were a tumultuous time for the American auto industry. Glamorous designs and big dreams were often crushed by fuel crises, rising insurance costs, and strict emissions regulations. Even cars with stunning looks couldn't escape the harsh realities of the decade. Here are 9 beautiful, eye-catching cars of the 70s that failed miserably in sales or reputation, proof that style alone wasn't enough to win over buyers.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 9. When American Motors Corporation, AMC, introduced the AMX in 1968, it made a bold statement. We can build a world-class performance car, and we're not afraid to challenge Detroit's Big Three. By 1970, the AMX had evolved into one of the most unique muscle cars of the era. Short, wide, aggressive, and filled with character. But it also faced an uphill battle that no amount of horsepower or style could fully overcome. The 1970 AMX was unlike most muscle cars in both proportions and attitude. Wheelbase, just 97 inches, shorter than a Corvette, giving it a nimble, almost European sports car stance. Width and stance, wide body with pronounced fender flares, giving a planted, muscular appearance. Design DNA, shared its platform with the Javelin pony car, but shopped to a 2-seat configuration, making it one of the few true 2-seater American muscle cars, Corvette being the other. 1970 updates, revised grille with more aggression, flush-mounted door handles, and new taillights for a sharper, more modern look. The AMX combined American muscle aggression with proportions that wouldn't look out of place on an Italian GT, a rare combination in its day. AMC knew performance credibility was key. Base engine, 290 cubic inch V8, standard, but most buyers opted for bigger mills. Performance options, 360 V8, 390 V8, 325 HP, the top dog for 1970. Transmission choices, 4-speed manual or automatic, with the Go package adding heavy-duty suspension, performance tires, and upgraded cooling. 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 6.5 seconds with the 390, competitive with Camaro SS and Mustang Mach-1. Its power-to-weight ratio gave it a snappy, aggressive feel, and reviewers at the time noted it handled better than many bigger muscle cars thanks to its shorter wheelbase. Here's where the AMX ran into trouble. Too small for a muscle car? Most muscle cars were based on mid-size coupes, Chevelle, GTO, Roadrunner. The AMX's smaller size confused buyers who associated muscle with bigger, more practical cars. Too American for a sports car? While it had Corvette-like proportions, it lacked Corvette prestige and refinement. Sports car buyers weren't going to their AMC dealer for a high-performance coupe. Price point. A well-optioned AMX could approach Corvette money, but without the same name recognition. AMC's limited reach meant fewer dealerships compared to Ford, Chevrolet, or Dodge. Limited advertising budget. AMC simply couldn't match the massive marketing muscle of the Big Three. Many AMC dealerships were small-town operations focusing on economy cars like the Rambler, not high-performance halo models. This meant potential AMX buyers often didn't even see one in person, much less test drive it. By 1970, the pony car wars were at full throttle. Ford Mustang Mach-1, Chevy Camaro Z28, Dodge Challenger RT all had huge marketing pushes. Pony cars offered 2+2 seating, meaning you could carry friends or family while still having muscle performance. The AMX's 2-seat design, while unique, severely limited its practicality for the average buyer. For many, the AMX was the cool car they admired but couldn't justify buying. The AMX sold just over 4,100 units in 1970, down from its 1969 peak. A combination of rising insurance rates, competition, and AMC's shrinking resources hurt momentum. 1970 was the last year for the true 2-seat AMX. After that, the name moved to the Javelin line as a performance trim, effectively ending its uniqueness. Today, the 1970 AMX is cherished by enthusiasts for its distinctive proportions and rarity, being one of the only American 2-seat performance cars of the muscle era. The fact that AMC dared to challenge the Big Three with something genuinely different. It's also one of the more affordable ways to get a rare conversation-starting classic muscle car, compared to the sky-high prices of Camaros and Mustangs. The 1970 AMC AMX was bold, fast, and visually striking, but it was a performance car from a company without the infrastructure to sell it widely. It existed in an awkward gap between pony car practicality and Corvette prestige, and without the marketing push to explain why buyers should pick it, the AMX remained a niche player. In hindsight, the AMX's uniqueness is exactly what makes it so appealing today. It was an underdog muscle car with exotic flair, built by a company that punched far above its weight.
Number 8. The Plymouth GTX entered 1971 as a highly respected name in the muscle car world. First introduced in 1967, it was marketed as the gentleman's muscle car, combining brute force performance with upscale trim. By the time the 1971 model rolled out, it had a stunning new body, powerful engines, and an undeniable street presence. But it also faced an era where buyers' tastes, and the market itself, were starting to shift against it. The 1971 GTX debuted Chrysler's new B-body redesign, part of the brand's fuselage styling theme. Longer, lower, wider, exaggerated curves that wrapped around the car. Aggressive nose, twin open grills set deep into the front fascia. Hood scoops, functional air grabber scoop available with a vacuum-operated trap door that would rise when you hit the throttle. Fastback roofline, sleeker than before, giving a more aerodynamic profile. Bright colors, iconic high-impact paint options like lemon twist yellow and sassy grass green made the GTX stand out in any parking lot. The overall effect was muscular, yet refined, true to its gentleman's hot rod marketing. In 1971, the GTX came standard with a 440 cubic inch Super Commando V8 producing 370 horsepower. That's right, the base GTX engine was bigger than many rivals' top performance options. 440 6-barrel option, triple 2-barrel carburetors, 385 horsepower, brutal mid-range power. 426 Hemi option, 425 horsepower, legendary street cred, rare. Only 30 GTX buyers in 71 checked this box. Transmission choices: heavy-duty 4-speed manual or torque flight automatic. Heavy-duty suspension and brakes, built to handle the extra power, especially with the go-wing rear spoiler and wide tires. The GTX was essentially a muscle car with no slow version. Every engine option was serious. Here's where things got tricky. The GTX was marketed as the upscale muscle car in Plymouth's lineup. Sitting just below it in price was the Plymouth Roadrunner, basically the same car mechanically, but stripped of some luxury touches and thousands cheaper. In 1971, a GTX started around $3,733, while a Roadrunner could be had for well under $3,300, and you could option the Roadrunner with the same 440 or even the Hemi. For younger buyers chasing quarter-mile glory, the Roadrunner offered the same thrills for less cash. The GTX's extra trim, insulation, and luxury features didn't matter much at the drag strip. 1971 was the beginning of a downturn for the muscle car. Insurance crackdown, skyrocketing premiums for high-powerful models pushed younger buyers away. Fuel prices were creeping upward. Regulations, stricter emissions rules began softening power outputs. 1971 was the last year before compression ratios dropped significantly across the industry. Changing tastes. Many buyers were shifting to smaller pony cars, like the 1971 Duster 340 or Mustang Mach-1, or more practical sporty sedans. Even without these factors, the GTX's luxury performance niche was shrinking fast. In 1970, Plymouth sold 7,788 GTXs. In 1971, sales plummeted to just 2,942 units, a drop of over 60%. By 1972, the GTX was no longer a standalone model. It was reduced as an option package on the Roadrunner.
Number 7. The 1974 model year marked a major transition for the American performance car market, and for the Camaro Z28 in particular. The Z28 had been born in the late 60s as a homologation special for Trans Am racing, and by the early 70s, it had evolved into a street performance icon. But by 1974, the muscle car party was winding down fast, and the Z28 found itself trying to keep its identity alive while facing federal regulations, rising insurance costs, and a cultural shift away from raw horsepower. 1974 was the first major styling update for the second-generation Camaro since its debut in 1970. The changes weren't just cosmetic, they were required. 5-mile-per-hour impact bumpers. Federal safety regulations mandated bumpers that could withstand a 5-mile-per-hour collision without damage. The Camaro got a 1-year-only urethane-covered front bumper that integrated with a larger grille opening. Rear bumpers were larger and wrapped around more. Extended body length. The bumpers and impact-absorbing mounts added several inches to the overall length. Z28 graphics package. Twin hood stripes, a blacked-out grille, and Z28 badging on the fenders and deck lid. Rear spoiler and rally wheels, still standard Z28 cues, maintaining the aggressive stance despite the safety-driven design changes. The end result was, the 1974 Camaro Z28 still looked mean, even if it was a little bulkier. The real trouble was under the hood. Federal emissions regulations and unleaded fuel requirements meant compression ratios had to drop and camshafts had to be tamer. 350 cubic inch LT1 V8, still the Z28's heart, but detuned from 255 gross horsepower in 1972 to 245 net horsepower in 1974. Lower compression, around 8-to-1, made the LT1 more emissions-friendly but dulled its top-end punch. Available with a 4-speed manual or Turbo 400 automatic. Despite the drop in power, the Z28 could still run respectable 0 to 60 times in the mid-7-second range, better than many performance cars of the mid-70s. The Z28 was no longer the screaming, high-RPM machine that it had been in 1970 to 71, but it was still one of the few cars in 1974 that could claim real muscle heritage. The Z28's timing couldn't have been worse. Oil crisis. The OPEC oil embargo hit in late 1973, sending gas prices soaring and sparking long lines at fuel stations. Insurance crackdown. High-performance models carried insurance premiums that were often as expensive as the car payments. Emissions laws. Car makers had to meet stricter tailpipe standards without modern electronics, which meant choking engines rather than tuning them. Changing buyer priorities. The big car plus big engine formula was losing ground to smaller, more fuel-efficient vehicles. In the same year, Ford made a big move, replacing the classic long-hood Mustang with the smaller, Pinto-based Mustang II. While enthusiasts saw it as a downgrade in performance, the Mustang II was perfectly timed for the fuel crisis and sold over 385,000 units in its debut year. The Camaro, by contrast, sold about 151,000 units, healthy, but far below Mustang's numbers. For the first time since 1967, the Camaro wasn't the performance car everyone was talking about. Z28 sales in 1974 were modest compared to earlier years, but the bigger story was that the Z28 was about to disappear. After 1974, Chevrolet dropped the Z28 entirely from the lineup, citing market trends and emissions challenges. It wouldn't return until 1977, and by then, it would be more of a visual performance package than a serious Trans Am racer for the street. Today, the 1974 Z28 holds a unique place in Camaro history. 1-year styling. The combination of second-gen Camaro lines with the first set of federally mandated bumpers makes it instantly identifiable. Last of the LT1 era. This was the final year for the solid-lifter LT1 small block in a Camaro. Survivor of the malaise years. While most of 74 performance cars were shadows of their former selves, the Z28 still offered respectable acceleration and handling. Collector rarity. Production numbers were low compared to later years, and many were driven hard, making clean survivors desirable. The 1974 Z28 represents the moment American performance cars had to change direction, not because the buyers wanted it, but because the law demanded it. It was a car trying to straddle two worlds, the raw mechanical freedom of the late 1960s and the regulated safety-conscious reality of the mid-1970s. It couldn't save the Z28 name from temporary extinction, but it gave the Camaro a fighting chance to weather the storm.
Number 6.
In the early 1970s, Detroit's Big Three were experimenting with smaller muscle cars. Insurance premiums were skyrocketing, the first whispers of emissions regulations were making engineers nervous, and buyers were starting to look for performance in smaller, lighter packages. Dodge's answer was the Dodge Demon, introduced for 1971 as a sporty, performance-oriented version of the Dart. It was stylish, quick, and affordable. But it ran into a problem Dodge never expected: its own name. The Demon was born from the Dodge Dart platform. Plymouth had launched the Duster in 1970, a swoopy fastback coupe version of the compact Valiant, and it was selling like crazy. Dodge wanted its own version. The Demon was essentially a Dart swinger coupe with the Duster's body shell, offered as the Demon 340 for performance fans and the Demon base model for budget buyers. Target audience? Young, performance-minded drivers who wanted muscle car fun in a smaller, cheaper, and more nimble package. For a compact, the Demon had a lot of visual punch. Fastback roofline, sleek and aerodynamic for the time, aggressive front grille, a split grille with a low and wide stance, Demon logo, a cartoon devil character holding a pitchfork which would become infamous. Bright colors, high-impact hues like plum crazy, hemi orange, and top banana made it pop. Sport stripes and hood scoops, optional tape stripes and dual snorkel hood scoops gave it real muscle car presence. While there was a base slant 6 version for economy-minded buyers, the Demon 340 was the real star. 340 cubic inch V8, 275 gross horsepower, lightweight, and rev-happy. 4-speed manual with a Hurst shifter or TorqueFlite automatic. SureGrip limited slip differential available for better traction. 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 6.5 seconds. Impressive for a compact. Handling was better than most big block muscle cars because of the lighter front end. The Demon 340 offered one of the best performance per dollar ratios in 1971. You could get near GTO speed for less money and lower insurance costs. The biggest challenge for the Demon wasn't engineering. It was marketing backlash. Religious groups, particularly Christian organizations, objected to the name Demon and its devil logo, claiming it was offensive and inappropriate for a family-oriented brand. Dodge had intended the name to be cheeky and youth-focused, but some dealerships in conservative areas refused to display or advertise the car. Letters of complaint poured into Chrysler's headquarters. The controversy was enough that by 1973, Dodge dropped the Demon name entirely, renaming it the Dart Sport, a far blander title. The Demon entered the scene at an awkward time. The muscle car market was starting to decline as insurance companies targeted high-performance models. Emissions regulations were already chipping away at horsepower. 1971 was one of the last full-strength years before compression ratios dropped across the board. Dodge's own lineup had heavy hitters like the Charger and Challenger competing for attention. The Demon was good, but it wasn't as heavily promoted as Dodge's bigger, more profitable performance cars. The Demon sold over 70,000 units in 1971, with the 340 model making up a smaller but devoted portion. For muscle car standards, it was successful, but its reputation became more about its name than its performance. After the name changed to Dart Sport in '73, sales continued, but the car lost some of its personality. Today, 1971 to 1972 Demon 340s are cult favorites among Mopar fans, lighter and often quicker than many bigger muscle cars of their day. The 1971 Dodge Demon is significant because it was one of the best examples of a compact muscle car done right, affordable, fun, and genuinely fast. It highlights how cultural perceptions can impact a car's market success just as much as mechanical performance. It's a time capsule of the last years before the muscle car market's sharp decline. Enthusiasts prize the Demon 340 for its rarity, especially in original high-impact colors, the forbidden branding that makes it a conversation piece, performance that still holds up well against period competition. If you see one at a car show today, chances are the owner will proudly have that little pitchfork-wielding devil decal front and center, something Dodge couldn't get away with back in 1971.
Number 5. By 1974, the American muscle car scene was in trouble. Rising insurance rates, stricter emissions regulations, and the looming energy crisis were reshaping the market almost overnight. The AMC Javelin AMX was AMC's flagship performance coupe, and the '74 model year would be its boldest and last hurrah in the traditional muscle car sense. American Motors Corporation was the smallest of Detroit's automakers, but it had a knack for punching above its weight. In 1968, AMC introduced the Javelin as a competitor to the Ford Mustang and Chevy Camaro. The AMX name originally belonged to AMC's short-wheelbase two-seat sports car, 1968 to 1970. But in 1971, AMC repurposed AMX as the top performance trim of the second-generation Javelin. By 1974, the Javelin AMX had evolved into a long, aggressive, race-inspired, grand touring muscle coupe. The 1974 Javelin AMX had one of the most distinctive shapes in the muscle car world. Bulging front and rear fender flares, integrated into the body rather than tacked on, giving it a muscular, athletic stance. Long hood and short deck, classic pony car proportions but more exaggerated than the competition. Wraparound front bumper, new for '74 to meet federal 5-mile-per-hour crash regulations, but well integrated into the design. Aggressive grille, wide, low, and flanked by inset headlamps. Sporty AMX graphics, stripes, hood decals, and unique badging that announced this was not your average Javelin. The look was pure performance. AMC wanted you to think of NASCAR, and they had reason to. Javelins had been winning championships in Trans Am racing, giving them real motorsport credibility. Despite the emissions clampdown, AMC still offered legitimate muscle under the AMX's hood. Standard 304 cubic inch V8, decent torque, but more show than go. Optional 360 cubic inch or 401 cubic inch V8. The 401 was the top dog with up to 255 net horsepower in '74 trim. Transmissions 4-speed manual or torque command automatic. Performance was respectable, especially with the 401 and optional Go package, but detuned engines and heavier bumpers meant it couldn't match the fire-breathing numbers from just a few years earlier. The problem for the 1974 Javelin AMX wasn't the car, it was the market. The oil crisis of late 1973 made buyers shy away from thirsty V8 coupes. Insurance rates for young performance buyers were sky high. Federal safety and emissions rules were changing every year, adding cost and cutting performance. AMC, with fewer resources than GM, Ford, or Chrysler, couldn't afford to keep heavily marketing a niche performance model. Even if the Javelin AMX looked fantastic, the public mood had shifted toward economy cars and personal luxury coupes. 1974 would be the final year the AMX name appeared on a Javelin. AMC discontinued the AMX trim for 1975 as the muscle era collapsed. The Javelin itself survived one more year before being phased out entirely in 1975. After that, AMC shifted its performance branding towards special editions of its smaller cars like the Hornet and Gremlin, and later the Concorde and Spirit. Today, the 1974 Javelin AMX is appreciated for its styling and rarity. The fender flares were ahead of their time. They wouldn't become common on American muscle until the late 70s and 80s. The 401 powered cars are especially desirable for their torque and relative scarcity. Only a few thousand '74 AMXs were built, making them a rare sight even at classic car shows. Collectors also love that AMC dared to be different. In a sea of Mustangs, Camaros, and Challengers, the Javelin's unique shape and bold colors stand out. The 1974 Javelin AMX is historically important because it represents the last gasp of AMC's traditional muscle car era, a styling direction that was both race-inspired and original, and a reminder that performance cars can be brilliant on paper, but fail when the market turns against them. In short, it was a great car at the wrong time.
Number 4. The early 1970s were a time of big cars, big power, and big statements. Buick, traditionally the brand for well-heeled, conservative buyers, shocked the market in 1971 with the third-generation Riviera, a long, curvaceous personal luxury coupe capped by a dramatic boat-tail rear end. By 1973, the Riviera still carried this daring shape, but the world around it had shifted hard, and Buick's masterpiece quickly became a sales liability. The late 1960s and early 70s saw an explosion of personal luxury coupes, cars like the Ford Thunderbird, Pontiac Grand Prix, and Oldsmobile Tornado. They blended comfort and performance with dramatic styling, aimed at buyers who wanted to look successful without jumping to a full-on Cadillac. The Riviera had been Buick's entry in this class since 1963, and by the early 70s, GM wanted it to stand out in a crowded segment. Chief stylist Bill Mitchell greenlit one of the most ambitious production car shapes ever put on an American road. The 1971 through 1973 Riviera was built on GM's E-Body platform, shared with the Tornado and Cadillac Eldorado, but its looks were pure show car. Key features: sweeping fastback roofline that tapered into a pointed rear end, a nod to classic 1930s Auburn speedsters, large wraparound rear glass that enhanced the nautical boat tail effect, massive front fenders and grille that projected power and luxury, long hood, short deck proportions, even on a car that was actually huge by modern standards. It was a car designed to make an entrance, and it did, but it also scared off some buyers who thought it was too radical for a Buick. By 1973, the Riviera had undergone its first styling tweak since the '71 debut. Heavier front bumper to meet new federal 5-mile-per-hour crash regulations, which dulled the nose's sharpness. Refined grille design with a slightly less aggressive texture. Interior updates with richer trim and more standard luxury features. Under the skin, the car still rode on a full frame with rear-wheel drive, powered by a massive 455 cubic inch V8. Even detuned for emissions regulations, the big block still delivered strong torque, though performance was starting to suffer under new restrictions. The biggest problem for the Riviera boattail wasn't styling, it was the world around it. The oil crisis of late 1973 sent fuel prices soaring and made buyers skittish about big, thirsty cars. The Riviera was a 4,500-pound personal luxury coupe that drank fuel like a muscle car. Even Buick's loyal customers began to shy away. Worse still, the boattail styling proved polarizing. Some loved its boldness and European-inspired fastback flair. Others thought it looked out of place on a Buick, a brand known for restrained elegance. The Riviera had sold well in earlier years, but by 1973, sales slumped significantly compared to the 1969-70 models. The boattail's complexity and specialized glass made it expensive to build. Buick realized that the design's love-it-or-hate-it nature was hurting its core market. In 1974, the Riviera was restyled with a squared-off rear end, effectively killing the boattail after just 3 years. Today, the '73 Riviera boattail is admired as a styling icon. It's one of the few early 70s American cars that looks like a custom showpiece straight from the factory. The design is aged into a cult classic, with collectors valuing its audacity. The '73 model, with its heavier bumpers, is slightly less graceful than the '71 to '72, but it's still instantly recognizable. Its failure in period is a reminder that design bravery doesn't always equal market success, especially when economic forces turn against you.
The 1973 Buick Riviera boat tail represents
Number 3. The mid-1970s were tough years for American performance cars. Emissions regulations, rising fuel costs, and insurance crackdowns had all but ended the muscle car era. But Pontiac, the We Build Excitement division of GM, wasn't ready to give up on sporty imagery. Enter the Pontiac Astra Formula, a subcompact hatchback meant to look like a pint-sized Firebird, but unfortunately, its mechanical DNA came straight from one of GM's most troubled experiments, the Chevrolet Vega. By the early 70s, U.S. automakers faced intense pressure from imported compacts like the Toyota Corolla, Datsun 510, and Volkswagen Beetle. GM's answer was the Chevrolet Vega, launched in 1970, a stylish, lightweight small car that promised advanced engineering. But GM wanted its other divisions to get in on the compact market too. Pontiac got the Astra, essentially a badge-engineered Vega, first sold in Canada in 1973, then introduced in the US for 1975. The Astra had the same H-body platform as the Vega, the same 140 cubic inch aluminum four-cylinder engine with an iron head, the same basic suspension and interior architecture. In other words, under the skin, it was all Vega. Pontiac, known for turning even mundane cars into sporty head-turners, decided to give the Astra some Firebird flair. In 1976, they offered the Astra Formula trim. This package included striped graphics inspired by the Trans Am and Firebird formula, sport wheels and trim accents for a performance look, front and rear stabilizer bars for marginally improved handling, and a slightly more aggressive stance. It was essentially a cosmetic muscle car treatment for a compact hatchback, Pontiac's way of selling sizzle, even if the steak was questionable. Unfortunately, all the sporty striping in the world couldn't disguise the fact that the Astra Formula still had Vega mechanicals, and the Vega had earned a disastrous reputation. Engine durability issues. The 2.3-liter aluminum block engine was prone to overheating and rapid wear, sometimes needing rebuilds before 50,000 miles. Rust vulnerability. Poor corrosion protection meant body panels could start rusting within a couple of years. Build quality problems. Inconsistent assembly quality meant rattles, leaks, and premature failures were common. Pontiac tried to reassure buyers by tweaking the engine metallurgy in 1976 and improving rust-proofing, but the stigma was already set. By 1976, imports like Honda Civic and Toyota Corolla had developed strong reputations for reliability and fuel efficiency. The U.S. subcompact market was still small, but growing, and buyers were increasingly suspicious of domestic attempts. Pontiac's core audience, people who wanted style and performance, wasn't naturally drawn to an economy car in the first place. The Astra Formula tried to bridge that gap by offering import-like size with Pontiac-like image, but it didn't fully satisfy either camp. The Astra sold in modest numbers but never became a breakout hit. Its main problems: performance was modest at best, around 87 horsepower, which looked particularly weak under a Formula badge. Buyers who wanted economy weren't drawn to the sporty graphics and higher price. Buyers who wanted performance quickly realized they'd be better off in a used Firebird or Le Mans. By 1977, Pontiac dropped the Astra name entirely, replacing it with the Pontiac Sunbird, which was still Vega-based but aimed more at a Euro market image. Today, the Astra Formula is mostly remembered as a quirky footnote. Styling-wise, it's charming in a mini muscle car way, especially in bright 1970s colors. Mechanically, it's infamous for sharing the Vega's weaknesses. Collectability-wise, extremely rare today because most rusted away or were driven into the ground. Survivors with intact Formula graphics are curiosity pieces at shows, more admired for nostalgia than performance. The 1976 Pontiac Astra Formula is a perfect example of GM's badge engineering philosophy of the era. Use an existing platform to quickly give each division a product in a growing market. Change the styling and trim to fit the brand's image. And hope buyers don't mind that the mechanicals are the same as the cheaper version.
It also stands as a lesson that styling can get people into the showroom, but it can't save a car with fundamental reliability issues.
Number 2. The Dodge Charger had built its reputation in the late 1960s as a bold, aggressive, performance-focused fastback coupe, the kind of car you could imagine prowling Woodward Avenue or starring in Bullitt. By 1974, however, the muscle car market was in serious trouble. Rising insurance premiums, the first wave of federal safety and emissions regulations, and the aftershocks of the 1973 oil crisis were forcing manufacturers to rethink their performance offerings. Dodge's solution was to reposition the Charger from a hardcore muscle car into a personal luxury coupe. The result was the 1974 Dodge Charger SE, SE standing for Special Edition. The 1974 model year brought the third generation of the Charger, and the changes were immediately clear. More formal roofline with small opera windows available. More chrome and trim, less emphasis on bare-knuckle aggression. Plusher interiors with options like velour, wood grain, and quieter cabins. The Charger was moving into territory dominated by cars like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo, Ford Elite, and Mercury Cougar XR7. All positioned as personal luxury coupes with a hint of sport. The 74 Charger SE still had a long hood, wide stance, and bold presence, but it wasn't the lean, fastback muscle car of old. Key changes included divided grille with a heavier, more upright front fascia, longer, more slab-sided body that felt substantial but less nimble, vinyl roof options that signaled luxury more than performance, hidden headlamps available on SE models for a premium touch. If the earlier Charger looked like a sprinter in track shoes, the SE looked like the same athlete in a three-piece suit. While the image softened, the powertrain menu was still impressive in theory. Base 318 V8 for economy-minded buyers, mid-range 400 cubic inch V8s, the mighty 440 Magnum, and even the 426 Hemi, although the latter was essentially a carryover and extremely rare by 1974. But by 1974, emissions controls and lower compression ratios meant even big engines were down on power. The raw numbers weren't as thrilling as they had been just a few years earlier. The Charger SE faced an identity crisis. Muscle car buyers saw it as soft and bloated, not the raw performance coupe they loved. Luxury coupe buyers already had strong loyalty to Monte Carlo, Thunderbird, and Cougar, brands with deeper personal luxury credentials. The oil crisis meant that even people who liked the Charger styling were nervous about buying a big V8 coupe. The result was that sales dropped sharply from the glory days of 1968 to 1970. The SE lineup sold okay for the time, but nowhere near its late 60s heights. The SE was the most luxurious trim, but it didn't pull in enough new customers to offset the muscle fans who would jump ship to smaller, sportier cars, or imports. The market was shifting under Dodge's feet. Insurance premiums were punishing younger performance buyers. Fuel prices were changing priorities towards efficiency. The rise of the personal luxury coupe meant Dodge had more competition than ever before. Today, the 1974 Dodge Charger SE is viewed as historically significant for marking the Charger's pivot from muscle to personal luxury. Visually appealing to fans of 70s styling, the opera windows, vinyl roof, and hidden headlights have their charm. Less collectible than the 1968 to 1970 Chargers, but gaining interest among enthusiasts who appreciate 70s luxury muscle. It also has a niche appeal because it represents that transitional moment when American car makers were desperately trying to keep the performance image alive while adapting to a new reality. The 1974 Charger SE is a textbook example of what happens when an automaker tries to straddle two markets at once. In chasing luxury buyers without fully letting go of its muscle roots, Dodge created a stylish, comfortable coupe but alienated its core performance audience. It's the story of the 70s in miniature. The cars got bigger and plusher. The performance numbers went down. The market was never the same. Number 1.
The Ford Thunderbird had, by the late 1970s, traveled a long way from its original 1955 two-seat sports coupe roots. It had been a luxury cruiser, a four-door land yacht, and now, in 1978, it had been downsized to keep pace with changing tastes, regulations, and economics. The new Thunderbird was leaner than its immediate predecessor, wore sharp new clothes, and carried plenty of visual drama. But under the skin, performance was in full retreat. The mid to late 1970s were a perfect storm for American automakers. Fuel economy mandates from the newly formed CAFE standards, emissions regulations that sapped horsepower, the 1973-74 oil crisis still fresh in buyers' minds, shifting tastes toward personal luxury coupes like the Chevy Monte Carlo and Chrysler Cordoba. Ford's response for 1977 was to move the Thunderbird to the intermediate-sized LTD2 platform, much smaller than the bloated 72 to 76 models. The 1978 model continued that formula with minor refinements. The 1978 Ford Thunderbird was an eye-catcher in the showroom. Stacked rectangular headlights that gave the front end a tall, upscale presence, long hood, short deck proportions that evoked sportiness, crisp body lines, and restrained use of chrome for a more modern, clean look. Optional Landau vinyl roofs and opera windows to feed the luxury image. It was a shape that could suggest speed, even though it was in reality built for cruising. Ford doubled down on the personal part of personal luxury coupe. Plush, deeply cushioned bench or bucket seats that felt like home furniture, simulated wood grain trim and thick pile carpeting, loads of comfort and convenience options, AM, FM, and 8-track stereo, tilt wheel, cruise control, and air conditioning. The Thunderbird had the feel of a premium car without the astronomical price tag, which made it a strong value in the showroom. Here's where the malaise-era reality set in. The 1978 Thunderbird offered 302 cubic-inch V8, standard in most regions, 351M V8 or 400 V8 for more torque. A big 460 V8 was still technically available in early production, but strangled by emissions controls. On paper, the numbers were dismal by muscle-era standards. Most versions were under 180 horsepower. 0 to 60 mile-per-hour times often took 11 to 13 seconds. Handling was soft, with suspension tuned for comfort, not cornering. The result was a car that looked ready for the fast lane, but was happiest in the right lane. Despite the performance lull, the 1978 Thunderbird was a hit. Its downsized proportions made it easier to live with than the outgoing giant. Ford priced it competitively, undercutting many rivals. Buyers in 1978 wanted comfort, style, and presence, not raw speed, and the T-Bird delivered exactly that. In fact, sales were so strong that 1977 to 1979 became one of the Thunderbird's best-selling eras. Today, the 1978 Ford Thunderbird is remembered as a classic malaise-era luxury coupe, all about style over substance. Popular with enthusiasts who appreciate 70s personal luxury charm. Affordable in the collector market, with values often tied to originality and condition, rather than performance pedigree. It's also a fascinating pivot point in Thunderbird history, bridging the gap between the massive 70s barges and the even smaller, more aerodynamic Thunderbirds of the 1980s. The 1978 Ford Thunderbird tells us a lot about the late 70s American car industry. Downsizing could save a nameplate in tough times, styling and comfort could sell more cars than horsepower, and even in an era of reduced performance, the right image could make a model thrive. It was a Thunderbird perfectly tuned to the tastes and constraints of its time, even if it couldn't outrun much more than a delivery van.